Have you ever started doing something and because it started in a good spot, but you ending up really worshiping the process over why you intended on doing it in the first place? That's really the heart of what we're talking about in Religion Kills, because we see, like Adam talked last week, with this Pharisee bringing in Jesus. It started in a good spot, but we see that a lot of the stuff that this Pharisee had in his heart, it all started in a good spot to please God, but it really became the act was really his form of worship, which really in turn brought worship to himself instead of to God. And that's really the hard part when religion kills, is that we start worshiping the process over God, and we miss out on the relationship with him. Jesus said to the Pharisee, he said, look, you're full of greed and wickedness because you're focusing on this process of ceremonial cleansing instead of on him being at the table with him. And this is what Jesus said to him in Luke 11:41. He said this: give as alms those things that are within you. Remember, he said to him, you're full of greed and wickedness inside of you. But Jesus said, give as alms those things that are within, and behold, everything is clean for you. This is a crazy idea, because this guy is there and he's struggling with this process to walk with God, and he thinks it should be out of him washing himself. And Jesus says, really, you have greed and wickedness that's directing your life because you're really worshiping yourself over me. And the idea is alms, of giving these things that are inside of us. It's turning those into an act of worship. The word for alms in Greek truly is, and I'm not making this up, it's compassionateness. It's the word compassionateness. It's having compassion for someone or something from within us. And that's really the heart of all of this. Today, Jesus is going to show us that giving isn't a religious act. It's truly an act of worship to God. But am I giving and living like Jesus, or am I giving and living like Tim? And when I give and live like Tim, it brings death. But when I give and live like Jesus, it brings life. Jesus says this to them in Luke 11:42. He says, woe to you, Pharisees. Now, really quick, woe to you, Pharisees isn't a, hey, what's going on, guys? It's going to be cool. This is a warning to them, like, this is a dangerous path you're on. So check out what I'm about to say. Woe to you guys because of this. You tithe mint and rue and every herb, and neglect justice and the love of God. See, these guys were giving, which is good, right? I mean, Jesus even continues on saying, he says, these you ought to have done without neglecting the others. He wants us to give. He wants the Pharisees to give. But they were so meticulous about giving that they forgot about the whole reason why they were giving. Jesus points out the mint and the rue and every herb. Why he pointed those out was because they were the smallest of the produce. They have barley fields and wheat fields and olive orchards and grapes, and yet they focused on the tiniest little thing, and they were so meticulous about it that they worshiped the process of giving because they brought comfort to themselves in giving. Now, what I want to ask you is this: have you ever found yourself doing this? Have you found yourself finding comfort in you giving to the church, or giving even of your time and resources, and that's the thing that is really bringing your salvation or your comfort in your walk with God? These guys were really on that path. And that's why Jesus said, woe to you, because what they were focused on is the process of counting out their mint leaves. Have you ever looked at a mint plant that pops up on your sidewalk in the middle of July? Has those little leaves all over it. And can you imagine them just sitting in their house, plucking one off, and every 9 leaves, they take a leaf and they put it in in their box they're going to take to the temple as their tithe. This is what they were doing. But what would happen was they would take their box of tithe and they start walking to the temple, and they would see a person on the street starving, and they would condemn them. They'd keep on going, and oftentimes probably wonder what they did to bring the curse of God on their life. Jesus is pointing this out to them, that they were so meticulous about their giving that they neglected justice. Now, the interesting thing about this is this word neglect in Greek is literally the word that we use for someone dying. It's passing away or ceasing to exist. He's saying this, that justice in their life was just like a loved one or a close friend that we know. When they've passed away, we have a memory of them, but we are never going to see them again until we see them maybe in eternity. But they're not in our life anymore. And this is what he was saying about justice and the life of a Pharisee. They were so consumed with giving, justice had died in their life. Now, what does the word say about justice? I want you to turn to Micah 6:8, and we're going to see some instruction from God that's really, actually incredible on how we're to walk out our life. Micah 6:8 says this: He has told you, oh man, what is good. So first of all, it says this: God's told us what is good. And what is that? Listen to this, okay? What does the Lord require of us but to do this, okay? Do justice. What does the Lord tell us is good, and what does he require of us? Do justice. What does justice mean? Justice means to do the right thing. It's not hard to figure this out, is it? Many of us even know this with our money and our finances. Oftentimes we get so consumed with our own greed that we see loved ones and friends and people in the church, they're going in need, and we have plenty, but we're too concerned about our own comfort and our path of life to give to them, even though we know it's the right thing. So God says this: what does the Lord say is good, and what does he require of us? Is to do justice, not just that, to love kindness. So first of all, do what's right, love to be kind to people. And not, it doesn't just stop there. He says this: walk humbly with God. Have you ever met a person that tithes regularly, gives to their favorite televangelist? They faithfully give in the Christmas offering. They might support some missionaries, but when you talk to them, they're the biggest jerk you've ever met in your life. This person is a modern day Pharisee who is one that's walking down a path that has the appearance of life with God because they're giving, and yet they're neglecting justice and the love of God in their life. So now we got to ask ourselves this, okay? We got to look back. Are we giving and living like Jesus, or are we giving and living like ourselves? That's really what it is, okay? Remember, Jesus is talking to the Pharisee about giving. Don't worship the process. Give out of a heart to do justice, and don't neglect it, but also to share the love of God. And this is what he says: look, you neglect justice and the love of God. They should have done both of these things without neglecting the others. So what does it look like to remember the love of God? Well, first of all, I think we got to identify and define what it means, what love means by God's standard, by God's definition. You know, the world will tell us that love means affirmation or to just cheer someone on in something in their life. That's not what it means at all. In fact, God tells us what love means in 1 Corinthians 13. And he starts out with this. He says, love is patient and is kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. This is what love is, okay? And Jesus says, okay, you know, as we're living this out, we do what's right, but we also let the love of God come from our life. We don't let it die and fade away. So many people probably are asking the question, how do I have that in my life? And I'd encourage you to think about this, okay? Think about how God has demonstrated his love towards you in the definition that 1 Corinthians has given us. Okay, think about how God is patient with you. how he's not rude with you. He's not arrogant with you. He's kind to you. In fact, it doesn't keep a record of wrongs. Like God chooses not to remember our sin anymore when we come to him and ask him to forgive us. I mean, God demonstrates love to us every second, every breath of our life. And as you meditate on this, as I meditate on this, I know that it just overflows inside of me, the thankfulness of God's love for me. That in turn makes it to where I want to pour out on other people. This is what I want to encourage you to think about, okay? As you're giving, are you demonstrating the love of God in your life? And as you demonstrate that, is it identified by people in such a way that they worship God because of it? Now, we're talking about this in the context of giving. Okay, Jesus starts out with, you give in this way, give, and don't neglect justice, but practice it, and demonstrate the love of God in the process. So how do we turn giving into an act of worship? How do we look at it in such a way and also demonstrate it in our life? And we're going to find the answer in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 6. Why don't you turn there? And as you're turning there, look at your neighbor and say this: are you giving and living like Jesus, or like yourself? Okay, 2 Corinthians chapter 9. Okay, Paul's writing to the church, and he tells them we're gonna receive an offering basically to provide for the needs of some saints, but we don't want it to be like out of duty or out of it's like a requirement. He basically is saying, I don't want you to do it because of religion. I want you to do it because you love these guys, and this is what we do as a church. And this is exactly where we're at today, is this is the answer for us to give and live like Jesus. Okay, he says this. The point is this, 2 Corinthians 9:6. The point is this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. But listen, whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. Okay, so what he's saying is this, okay? He compares it to someone sowing seed. A person that takes seed and they plant tons of seeds all over the place, they just cast seed all over. Well, guess what? They're going to have a harvest that has more things popping up and growing, right? But a person that doesn't scatter a lot of seed, they're not going to see as much stuff growing, if any, growing. And so he says, look, whoever sows bountifully, they're going to reap bountifully. But if you sow sparingly, you'll reap sparingly. And so he says, look, let's think about this. Why are we giving? Don't give reluctantly. Don't give just because someone pressures you into it. Give because you love God and you're happy to give. Turn it into an act of worship. God, you've given me this. You're the one that owns all of this. I'm just a steward. So I want to give back to you and serve you, Jesus. So do what you can only do through my giving. Paul continues on. He says this: and God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times, you may abound in every good work. So as we as cheerful givers give of the things that God has given to us, he's going to make, listen to this, all grace abound to you, so that you'll be sufficient in all things at all times, and you can abound in every good work. This is an amazing promise, I believe, from God. And I bet if you've practiced giving as an act of worship in your life, you've seen this kind of idea take place. You've seen God be faithful in providing for you and making you sufficient in all things at all times, abounding in every good work. But it doesn't stop there. Listen to this, okay? As it is written, 2 Corinthians 9:9, as it is written, he has distributed freely, he has given to the poor, his righteousness endures forever. He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. So think about this, okay? We are really the ones that are the farmers, basically, or the gardeners. God's the one that brings or supplies the seed. And he's saying, hold your hands out. Okay, all the stuff that I have, all the stuff that you have, all the things that we fight and toil for, they're all God's anyways. And he says, look, have your hands open. I'm going to put seed in it, and you cast that out. You throw some out, God's going to multiply more seed. Why is that? Because he wants to increase the harvest of your righteousness. He says this, you'll be enriched in every way to be generous in every way, which through us will produce thanksgiving to God. Now, here's the really amazing part of this, and this is what we got to think about as an act of worship, is that as we are giving more and more, and we're saying, God, just this is yours, I just want to give out to meet the needs of people so that you can get glory. What's happening is people are in turn thanking God for what we have done. They're being blessed by God, and they thank him and they worship him because of an action that we take in giving. Now, let's think about it in the context of this. What were people that were encountering the Pharisees and their giving encountering? It's more than likely self-righteousness, greed, them being the ones that have everything, but there's people on the street that are suffering. They're the ones that are supposed to care for the poor and the needy, but and yet they're the ones that are dominating them and even exacting offerings from them so they can get more of a benefit. That's what they're encountering death because it's a religious thing. But Jesus says, the Lord instructs us, if we give in such a way of worship, it's going to produce thanksgiving in other people, and they'll in turn thank God. So Paul continues on in 2 Corinthians. Okay, listen to this. The ministry of this service is not only supplying the needs of the saints, but is also overflowing in many thanksgivings to God. This is really what the heart of all of this is giving and living like Jesus. Is we're here to be the church. We're here to know God, demonstrate him to others. And as we give in this way, it provides for the needs of the saints. The reason why we as a church can give out so greatly is because so many of us here give. And as we give, it provides for a person who might be down and out, who doesn't have any food. We will never turn away a person that's hungry. We'll always feed them in some way. So we'll feed them through the food pantry that's supplied by those of us who give to make that thing full for people that fall in hard times. They can get a box of food. We also have a way of giving to provide for a person. Maybe they've fallen on hard times to pay their mortgage. And as we maybe they didn't have any idea how this is going to happen, but we say we want to bless this person. We've been given this by God. We want to follow his guiding. We're going to pay for their mortgage. And I know this has happened before where people are like, we had no idea what we're going to do, but we just thank God so greatly that he showed up in such a way to provide for us. There's others that have been on the verge of homelessness because they have an eviction notice. They don't know what they're going to do. They come to us, so they're desperate. And sometimes we just don't know what action to take, but we have this saying in the church that when in doubt, we give it out. We'd rather err on Jesus' literal words from Matthew 25 than just judge them according to the world's standard. And so we give out and we help provide for them to stay in their home for this time. What happens when we do this is people glorify God and thank him. And I'm thankful for that, you guys. That's what we're here to do, is we're here to direct people to worship God. Now, I know there's some out there that don't like this idea. In fact, there's been people in our church in previous years who have left our church and confronted me because they say we're enabling people to continue down a wrong path. And I say this, guys, I will always take the words of Jesus in Matthew 25 seriously, where he says, when I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was a stranger, you welcomed me. When I was sick in the prison, you visited me. We'll always take those words to heart, and we'll walk that path out of worshiping God through obeying his word by providing for the needs of people. We will give and live like Jesus. And that's really what today is all about. Are you giving and living like Jesus? Turn to your neighbor and ask him, are you giving and living like Jesus? Today, I hope that we walk away giving and living like Jesus and not giving and living like myself.